Welcome to the Effortless English Show with the world's #1 English teacher, AJ Hoge, where AJ's more than 40 million students worldwide finally learn English once and for all, without the boring textbooks, classrooms, and grammar drills. Here's AJ with a quick piece to help you learn to speak fluent English effortlessly.
Frustration is good. Why? Frustration is good for your learning, for your improvement. That's our topic today. As always, go to effortlessenglishclub.com. That's my website, effortlessenglishclub.com. Go there, join my VIP program, and you speak English fluently. You speak English powerfully. You speak English effortlessly. When you become a member at effortlessenglishclub.com, that's the website. Go there, join, commit, don't quit. Lots of people joining today. We're live on YouTube as usual. Just going to let some of our live viewers come. Lots of people saying hello from the various countries. Lots of Brazilians today, as usual. All right. So our topic today is frustration. Frustration. Here, while we're waiting for people to come, let's get the official dictionary definition of frustration. Then I'll give you my definition. The feeling of being upset. So this is just a dictionary definition. The feeling of being upset or annoyed. So it's an emotion, right? It's an emotion. You feel upset or annoyed. So it's generally, people think of it as a negative emotion. As the result, so here's the important part of why. The result of being unable to change or achieve something. Right? Unable to change or achieve. So it's feelings of sometimes anger, annoyance, upset. Why? Caused by a failure to achieve. Right? You want something, but you can't do it. You want to change something, and you can't change it. You want to achieve something, get something, and you can't get it. Then you feel frustration, right? So this is the feeling we get when we're trying to get something, trying to do something, but we can't. We're trying, but we can't do it. We fail for some reason, and that's the cause of this feeling of frustration. And then a second definition they have here, the prevention of progress, success, or fulfillment. Right. So that's another, it's caused when our progress, our success is prevented somehow. Prevented or fails. Frustration. When you cannot achieve an objective, says Magualida Lanz on our comments. Yes. All right. So frustration. Why frustration is good. Most of us think of it as bad, including me. Right? But my mind has recently been changed about this. So I've always thought, that, of course, learning is good and new challenges are good. But I didn't really think of it at the emotional level, but two things changed my mind about this emotion of frustration. And most people think of frustration as very, very, very negative, right? Including me. Like, we don't enjoy frustration usually. When I get frustrated, right, it's kind of very close to anger. It's very close, right? Because we're frustrated, we're angry that we can't get what we want. We can't do what we want. We can't learn what we want. So I experience frustration a lot in Jiu-jitsu, for example, right? I'm fighting in Jiu-jitsu and I'm trying some new strategy, trying some new technique, trying some new something in Jiu-jitsu. And I studied it. I practiced it at home a little bit, and I tried in a fight, and it fails. It doesn't work, and I'm like, what? Right? And I get frustrated. Especially, I try it several times, not just one time. I try it several times. I try against different people, and every time it fails. And then what happens? I feel this exact feeling of frustration. Like, why won't it work? I watched the video, I took all the notes, I practiced it at home, and it won't work. I can't make it work. And I get, all right? I know that you have this experience in English, right? Maybe you've studied, some vocab, and you memorized it. You think you memorized it. And then in a real conversation, there's an opportunity to use the new word, and you forget it. You can't remember it in that moment. You can't remember it in the conversation. And then later you're like, why did I forget the word? Why? I know I remembered it. I memorized it. I studied it. Why did I forget it in the real conversation? Or grammar. Of course, this happens even more with grammar. You know the rules of the past tense and the present perfect tense. You know all these rules. You have studied them for many years. And then you get in a real conversation and you use the wrong grammar or you use the wrong pronunciation. The other person can't understand you. And what happens? We get frustrated like, why? Right? And it's a tough emotion. It's a tough feeling to deal with. So let's talk about why it's actually good and why we need to change our mind about it. Why frustration is actually a good sign. It's a very, very good sign. This is based on two things. Number one, I watched a podcast, a very interesting podcast from a guy named Dr. Huberman. Dr. Huberman. He's a brain, I think he's a neurologist. So people who study the brain and the nervous system. And he talks a lot about how do we learn things, and especially as we get older, not just as young children, but even as we're getting older, our whole lives, how do we continue to learn? What's the process? How does our brain adapt and continue learning? So Napoleon Jr. says, I follow Dr. Huber, and he's also a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. So great. So he understands this topic. So Dr. Huberman really talked a lot about the importance of frustration, why it's actually a good sign. It's a very, very good thing to be frustrated when you're trying to learn. And this sort of changed my mind. I'm like, oh, frustration is good. I always thought of it as a bad sign. Like I always thought, frustration, this means I'm doing something wrong and I need to change something. And I usually would take a break. Like I'm getting frustrated in jiu-jitsu, so I'm going to take a break from jiu-jitsu for a little bit. Not take a break completely, but to maybe just take a break from what I'm trying to do. Don't think about it too much. Or, take a break from English, don't just listen and relax. Don't try to improve too much. But actually, that's not so good. So let's talk about it. So the first thing I'm going to read actually is from a jiu-jitsu fighter, a very famous jiu-jitsu fighter. This is a book called Breathe. It's a very good book, by the way. Breathe it's from Rickson Gracie. And if you don't know who Rickson Gracie is, the Gracie family, very super famous in jiu-jitsu and really the kind of the developers of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. There are lots of Gracies. Okay, but many people say that Rickson, specifically Rickson's older now. He's like retired. He's in his 60s, I think. But you hear a lot of people, including people in the Gracie family, say he was the best fighter in the family. Especially, he fought early mixed martial arts, right? So he was not doing only jiu-jitsu tournaments. He was, had punches and kicks. And actually, he fought in a time where they had almost no rules at all. They could poke each other in the eyes and really terrible, nasty stuff. So it was really hard, tough fighting. And also no time limits, no rounds, no time limits. They just put the fighters in the ring and they just fought until somebody won. And it might go for 30 minutes. It might go longer. No breaks. No breaks, almost no rules. So very hard, tough fighting. And Rickson was very, very, very tough. He was a really good fighter. And in his book, I'm going to read this section because it talks about frustration. He says, okay, so he said, he talks about opening his mind and being humble. He talks about the importance of humility, which we've talked about recently. And then he starts talking about frustration. He says, in order to push myself Here, I'll share my screen if you're watching on video. You can see it. All right. He says, in order to push myself, I need to feel stress, disappointment, and frustration on a daily basis. So this is very interesting. To improve, right? To push himself, he says, in order to push himself, that means to continue improving. Continue improving. To continue improving, he said, I needed, not wanted, not useful. I needed to feel stress, disappointment, and frustration on a daily basis, meaning every day. So these are things most of us want to avoid. We want to avoid feeling disappointed. We want to avoid feeling stress. And we want to avoid feeling frustration. Rickson said he needed those. They were necessary for improvement, necessary for learning, necessary for getting better, for being good, for developing a skill. He needed to feel stress and frustration. Isn't that interesting? I always tried to work from a place of discomfort. So he needed to feel uncomfortable. Discomfort is the opposite of comfort. And we talk about this, get out of your comfort zone. But he goes much farther, much more than just being uncomfortable. Right? We all know we need to get out of our comfort zone. We can't be comfortable all the time. We know that to improve, but he's saying, no, he needed to feel stress, disappointment, and frustration, which are very strong negative emotions. We usually think of them as negative, right? He said he needed to feel the taste of defeat. Defeat means losing. Isn't this interesting? This is a guy who was a champion. I believe he was undefeated. He had a huge number of fights and never lost in his professional fights. But he said he needed to feel the taste of defeat, the taste of losing in his training. I kept that taste in my mouth at all times by constantly creating challenges that kept me connected with defeat. So isn't this interesting? So it's the exact opposite of what we hear a lot of times, where we need to always feel good and, the secret, and always just imagining success all the time and try to build our confidence all the time. That's also important, of course. But he's saying he needed to do the opposite. He needed to feel failure every day, is what he's saying. This helped. Why? Because this gave him that feeling, that need and the desire to improve. If you're not failing, if you're not frustrated, then really unconsciously and unconsciously in your brain, there's no pressure to improve. I'm not just talking about in your, when you're thinking about it, but even just, in the back of your mind, your brain is kind of lazy. I think we're all naturally lazy at some level. And if you're always winning, then you think it's very natural. Of course, you think, well, I don't need to continue improving. I don't need to improve. I'm already winning all the time. I'm already successful. Why do I need to keep pushing? Why do I need to keep improving? There's no need, right? So here's another key section, which I'm going to highlight on the screen. Some people train and train. Train means practice. Train and train, but never get any better because they practice only what they're good at against people they can beat. Again, let's go back to that. So he's saying some people, they train, they practice and practice, but they don't get better. They keep practicing, but they don't get better. Why? They only practice what they're good at already. They're just working on what they're already good at. So there's no growing. There's no challenge, right? There's no frustration. And maybe, they will stay good at that. They'll continue to be good at what they're practicing. But they don't get new skills. They don't get new ability. They don't grow. They don't get better. Why? To get better, you have to focus on things that you don't know, that you're not good at. And when you focus on something you're not good at, guess what? Frustration, disappointment, and defeat. It's natural. We'll stop there, and then I'll talk about Dr. Huberman. But I've noticed this in my own jiu-jitsu practice, for example, that every time I try something new, it's like I go backwards. And I saw this other guy, another coach was talking about this, and he was saying, this guy's a high-level black belt, and actually one of Rickson's students. The guy was saying that don't feel bad. He was teaching something at some seminar, teaching a new skill, a new move. And some of the guys at the seminar, some of the students he was teaching, were also black belts and brown belts, like high-level guys. And he was saying, don't feel bad if you're not good at this, even if you're a black belt. He says it doesn't matter. He says, because when you learn something new, you always go back to white belt. You always go back to beginner again. He says, I'm the same. I'm a black belt many years, but when I try a new technique, when I try something new, when I try to learn a new move, a new technique, I become a white belt again at that technique. I'm good at other stuff, but when I'm trying new stuff, I go back to the beginning. Now I am no good anymore. Now I'm just a white belt again, like everybody else. And I fail, and the other guys beat me, and I feel frustrated. And then you have to build it back up, and it gets better until you become a black belt at that technique. And it's the same in English. You can start off and you're just speaking really simple conversations, small talk, right? Where are you from? What's your family? That kind of, what's your job? And you can become a black belt in small talk, right? Because it's the same topics again and again. And eventually those topics can become very easy and comfortable for you in English. You feel very relaxed and confident and comfortable with those. That's fine. But then what happens? Maybe you go to some party or something, and they start talking about business. And you can't understand what they're talking about. They're using different vocabulary. They're using different idioms. And you feel like, oh my God, my English is terrible. I'm just a beginner again. My English sucks. Well, it's not that all your English sucks. It's just that you're trying a new area, new vocab, new topics, new people. And so, yes, in that area, you're back to white belt again. You may be a black belt in small talk, basic conversation, which is good for you. But when you try a new area, back to white belt again, back to beginner, frustrated again. This sucks. I can't remember anything. I'm making mistakes. I don't understand the vocabulary. And you suddenly feel like you're no good. Your English is terrible again. What happened? I thought I was good. Now I'm terrible. You're not generally terrible, but you're terrible in this new area. This is always going to be true. And eventually, maybe you decide, I'm going to learn business English now. I need it for work. So you start focusing on business English. You do business English courses, and you start listening to English and podcasts and talking about English and all of it, business. And you become really good at business English. And you know the vocab, you know the topics. You become a black belt in business English. Great. And you feel fantastic again. You're strong, confident. My English is great. And then what do? Then maybe you go to a party and you're talking to teenagers, or you go to someone's house and to a family member, and they have teenage kids, and they start talking, and they're native speakers, Americans, and they're using a lot of slang and idioms and casual, and they're talking about movies. And again, you feel like, I can't understand what they're saying. And suddenly your English feels low level again. Because now they're using this very casual English with slang and idioms, and you have not practiced that. You've not listened to that. So back to white belt again. Frustration again. Right? Indeed. So here's the cool part. In the podcast I listened to from Dr. Huberman, he talks about how frustration is very important for the learning process for our brains. That when we're learning new things, there's kind of two parts, right? Two steps, we could say, of learning. Step one is conscious learning. What does that mean? That's the learning when you know it's happening. You know you're learning, right? You're studying, you're practicing, you're thinking about it, right? This is when you're You're thinking about new words in English and you're thinking about what they mean. You're thinking about the pronunciation. How do I say that word? How do I move my mouth? You're thinking about the grammar. Oh, how do I change the verb? This is conscious, right? Or maybe you're just listening to a podcast and you're trying to understand what's that word? It's very conscious. You're very focused. And that's only step one. And what Dr. Huberman says is that's actually the smaller step. Most of our real learning happens in step 2, which is unconscious. That's when you're sleeping, you're resting, you're doing something else. You're not thinking about it, but your brain unconsciously, meaning you're not noticing it, but your brain is actually trying to figure out and solve those problems and remember all that new information long term so you can really use it. Right? That's the difference between, we know we can all memorize things, but using it is the difficult part, right? You can memorize a lot of words, but then you forget them in the conversation, right? It happens to me in jiu-jitsu all the time. I think I've studied some new technique, and then I go to fight, and I can't do it. What happened? Well, I have the conscious part, at least somewhat, I have it, but it hasn't really gotten in deep where I can really do it, where I really understand it unconsciously. Now, what's cool about this is the unconscious learning. What is the trigger? What causes your brain, unconscious brain, to focus on a problem, to focus on information and try to learn it? Frustration. Frustration is the signal. That feeling of frustration is what tells your brain, this is a problem. I need to solve it, right? Without the frustration, you can study and study. But then it's very easy then next, you just forget it. Because your unconscious brain, when you're sleeping, when you're resting, when you're doing something else, doesn't think it's important, doesn't focus on it. You think of it, the frustration is like energy, like electricity. It turns on the unconscious part, step 2, and tells your brain, figure this out, right? So this is why that, for example, you might study some new words and you can't remember them. And then you go to a conversation and you forget and you get frustrated. And then you go back and you review those words, and now you've got that energy, the frustration, and your unconscious brain will start thinking about it, and then you will remember those words next time, or maybe it might take a few times. So you might need to be frustrated a few times. So the important part, the practical part that helps us is what Dr. Huberman said. You should try to feel frustrated. Exactly what Rickson said. You should try to feel frustrated. Don't avoid it, right? Most of us avoid it. And I used to do this until really recently. I thought my brain was telling me if I was frustrated that it's time for a break. Like, okay, I'm doing too much, and now it's time to take a break and maybe do something else for a while. But Dr. Huberman says, do the opposite. When you feel frustrated, do more. Don't stop. Don't quit at that moment. Right? Don't stop. Don't take a break. When you're frustrated, that's the sign that, this is good. Your brain is paying attention now. Your unconscious brain, right? Your emotional brain is now paying attention. So practice more. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing, even though you're frustrated. When you're practicing and frustrated, that's the best practice. The best practice is when you're frustrated and making mistakes. Not when you're practicing perfectly. When you're practicing perfectly, that's actually less powerful. So, for example, I'm trying a new jiu-jitsu move here at home, and I'm doing it slowly. That's okay to kind of start to remember it, but I'm doing it slowly, so yeah, I can do it perfectly, right? I can look at my notes. I can go very slowly. Nobody's fighting against me. It's really easy to do. There's no frustration. But if I go against another guy doing it, even if he's just half resisting, half defending, now I start getting frustrated. I start making mistakes. I did the grip wrong. I moved wrong. I went to the wrong side. And it becomes frustrating. And that's when my brain starts turning on, like, that's when your unconscious will start really working. So don't stop. So this is important for your English. When you feel frustrated, when you're having conversations and people don't understand you, when you're forgetting your vocab and you're starting to get really annoyed, when you're listening to audios and you're having trouble, keep going. Don't stop. In that moment, do 10 more minutes. Do 30 more minutes while you're frustrated. Practice while you are feeling frustrated. Continue to practice when you feel frustrated, when you feel stressed, when you feel disappointed. Don't take a break in that moment. Keep going. This is his message, Dr. Huberman's, and it's essentially what Rickson's saying too. So this is very different for me, because like I said, I always thought that, I know we need to challenge ourselves. I know that. Everyone knows that. But what I didn't realize is that when we're frustrated, we should keep going for a while. And then the next level, the mastery level of this, Dr. Huberman says, try to smile and maybe laugh a little bit and actually enjoy the frustration. Because this tells your unconscious brain that the frustration is good. And he said, in the beginning, you're just pretending, right? Because you're not really enjoying it. You're not really enjoying it, but you just pretend like, hey, I'll smile. Okay, I'm really frustrated, and I'm really frustrated because I'm making mistakes, and I'm doing badly, and I'm failing. Hey, but I'm going to smile. I'll force myself a fake smile. Hey, this is good, and I'm going to keep going now and keep practicing, even though I feel terrible. So it's going to feel fake in the beginning. That's what Dr. Huberman said, and it will, of course. But what he said is that, fake it till you make it. You've probably heard this phrase, fake it till you make it. You keep doing that, and you actually will eventually start to enjoy the feeling of frustration, because you'll realize, this is good. This is good. Now I'm really learning. Now I'm really challenging myself. And this is what Rickson's saying. This is obviously Rickson is world-class, fighter, professional, super high level. And what Rickson learned is he learned to need the frustration. He wanted it, right? Rickson learned to like that frustration and desire the frustration and try to get the frustration and need it every day. He didn't feel good unless he felt frustrated every day. He didn't feel good unless he had some failure every day. That's mastery level. Okay? That's when you really can become quite amazing and really improve your learning. I'll end with one very specific example from my own jiu-jitsu training, because I've been trying this in the last 2 weeks. I just since I heard the podcast and I read that, I've been trying it myself, and it has helped me. So in jiu-jitsu, there's something called a guillotine or guillotine choke, and that's when someone chokes you from the front, right? It's like a headlock. Right. Most people know headlock, right? So if they wrap your head with one arm and they grab their hand with the other arm, right, and then they pull up and it chokes your throat, and it doesn't feel very good. Okay, it's a very tough one. It's a strong choke, and so I've been practicing escaping because I was getting choked a lot in this. People were grabbing my head. Specifically, my instructor did it, and so I'm like, okay. This means I need to practice this. I need to practice escaping. I'm going to try escaping this. So I studied some escapes, and my instructor taught me, some basic how to defend and escape. But that's not enough, right? That's step one. That's conscious learning. Where I'm like, okay, I'll put my hand here and turn my head and put my hands here and move to this side, and right. But that's all conscious. So then I just with one of our other instructors. Every time I would fight him for about 5 minutes, I would only do this position. I just ask him, just put me in the choke, do the choke on my head, grab my neck, and I'll try to get out. Okay, so what happened? The first time I did it, I tapped like 5, 6, 7 times. I could not get out. I think I got out one time. He started being nice and letting me out a little bit, but it would be like 3 seconds. We'd say ready, go, and I would try to get out, try to do the technique, and he would. And I was coughing and tapping, immediately. I'm like, So, and I think I'm doing it. Consciously, I think I'm doing all the right steps. Oh, I'm putting my hand there. I'm doing this. Why is it not working? Try again, fail. Try again, fail. The first day I did it with him, it was disaster. I was very frustrated. But I remembered this podcast and this little quote from Rickson, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue going. So I kept working on the guillotine escape with him, the guillotine. I always say guillotine because it's got 2 L's. I think it's Spanish. But anyway, I'm not sure what the official English pronunciation is, actually. I'll say guillotine. Anyway, guillotine, choke, I worked on it, and it was very frustrating, but I didn't stop. And I tried to remember, okay, frustration's good. Frustration's good. Don't get upset. But, I was still upset. And then after the class, I walking home, and I was like, I was very frustrated, and I was like, why didn't it work? It didn't work. Nothing worked. I was trying to remember all the steps. Like, I know I was trying them all. But I'm like, okay, I'm not going to quit. Next class, I'm going to do it again. And I did it again with him the second time. Again, almost exactly the same thing happened. He was a little nicer with me, basically. But I still could not get out. Very frustrating, but I kept going. I'm like, okay, I'm going to push into this. I'm not going to stop. Because in the past, what I would do is I would say, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to stop trying to do this guillotine escape. I'll work on something else, and then I'll come back to guillotines later when I'm not frustrated. But this time I said, no, I'm going to keep doing it. This frustration's good. I'm going to keep going. And so I did it again. I asked my instructor for some advice. Like, it's not working. Why is it not working? And then finally yesterday, I did it again with him. The same guy, this black belt instructor, and much better. It wasn't perfect, but I did so much better. And, it was just really, I think a lot of the improvement was unconscious because I'm still doing basically the same moves, but somehow it's the small things, right? Somehow my timing was better. I was doing them in the right time. I started doing a few little small things like with my shoulder that my instructor showed me. And anyway, just by pushing through and my brain I was just kind of crazy about this one technique for a while because I was getting so frustrated about it that, I think it finally my brain kind of started figuring it out. And then suddenly like a big jump, a big improvement yesterday or 2 days ago. Right. And I'm not going to quit now. I'm going to tell him, all right, now go do it harder. Don't be nice. Try to choke me as fast as you can. And he's a black belt, so he's much better than I am. So, that's, that's the key. When you start doing better and you start feeling good, you need to get frustrated again. This is what Rickson's saying. Right? So this is the thing. We all want to feel good. So when we start to improve and we're getting success, we kind of want to stay with our success, right? And just enjoy it for a while. This feels good. But what Rickson's saying is, no. Every day you've got to feel frustrated. So when the new thing becomes easy finally, when you finally learn and improve, well, now you've got to do something more difficult so you feel frustrated again. That's how you know that you are challenging yourself when you feel the frustration. All right, let's get into comments and questions. Let me turn on my aircon real quick, my fan. Okay, I'm a little hot. Okay. All right, let's get to our live questions and comments. Moody says, we need to get used to living with frustration. There are many cases when our mind stops focusing when we are frustrated and stressed out. That means we need a break sometimes. Yeah, but we do, of course, need breaks sometimes. But the point is that when you feel frustrated, don't take a break immediately. This is what Dr. Huberman's saying. Keep going for a while. Maybe another 15 minutes, maybe another 10 minutes, maybe another 30 minutes. Then take a break. So yes, of course. And during the break is when your unconscious brain will actually help you improve. It will start solving problems and figuring things out, especially when you're sleeping. So you definitely need rest and you definitely need sleep. The point is, though, just when you feel frustrated, don't stop immediately. This is the key word, immediately. Keep going for a while. And it just depends how long can you keep going when you're frustrated. Maybe in the beginning you can only do 5 more minutes. And then maybe eventually you can do 10 more minutes, 20 more minutes, 30 more minutes, whatever you're doing. And then when you take a break, this is another thing Dr. Huberman said, is when you do take a break, try not to think about the problem. Try not to think about it. Let your brain rest totally. So this is also something new and something I'm still trying to learn and trying to practice. So he's saying, like, so for example, let's say my jiu-jitsu example, I go and I practice at jiu-jitsu, and then the class is over, and then I'm walking home. Well, my habit usually was, while walking home, was to think about every fight and what did I do wrong and what was good, what was bad, how could I improve, what areas am I having trouble with. And Dr. Huberman said, don't do that. You can do it later, but don't do it immediately after your practice. That immediately after you practice, you should do something totally different and not think about it. So that means, like, for English, let's say you listen to English for 2 hours, right? And you're lots of English. Maybe you get frustrated. Maybe you're listening to some new stuff, some that's more difficult or not. But when you're done with your English listening, take a break and don't think about English for a while. Or do something totally easy, but don't think about it. You need a total break. Go do some exercise, or I don't know, do something completely different. Take a nap. I read another famous jiu-jitsu guy, Gordon Ryan. I read that he takes naps after his jiu-jitsu training. So kind of like Rickson, he's training hard, and then after, he doesn't like sit down and think about jiu-jitsu. He just goes to sleep. He takes like a 30-minute nap or hour nap. I don't know how long. And that gives his brain a break and lets his unconscious brain start thinking about it. Thank you, by the way, for those of you who were donating. Napoleao Jr., thank you for the donation. And Silver, thank you for the donation. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I'm going to go back up towards this top and see if I can find our comments. Hey, Anna, good to see you as always. So Napoleao Jr. Is Brazilian and has a brown belt with that's the one just under black belt. He's almost a black belt. So much better than I am. And he's right. He says, Jiu-Jitsu teaches us to be humble. Indeed it does. So see, Adel says, I don't think frustration is good because it deteriorates my body badly. Well, this is the point. This is probably the common attitude most of us have. Frustration is not good. It makes us stressed out. So this is really about changing our attitude about frustration, right? What does it mean, right? Because the old meaning that I also had is that frustration is stress and negative. And what Dr. Huber's saying and what Rickson's saying is frustration is positive. It's a sign of challenge. It's a sign that we are learning, that we're pushing ourselves to get better. Obviously, there are limits, okay, to this. But some amount of frustration is actually necessary, is what they're saying. And I think it's right. I think they're correct. Anna Grigoreva says, frustration is sharply felt when you take care of babies. You can't handle lots of stuff. I think you understand me because you have twins. Oh, yes. This is true. As a parent, that's exactly right. As a parent, I get frustrated a lot, as most parents do. And exactly, because I have twins and twin toddlers at the moment. And yeah, I got frustrated yesterday because one of them had a crazy meltdown, was hungry and tired, and we're out in public and riding on trains, and then I'm trying to deal with both of them. Very tough. And like I'm learning and improving at being patient, not my strongest trait. Being patient has always been tough for me. But since becoming a parent for the last 3 years, I'm definitely more patient than I used to be. Well, because I'm constantly frustrated by the babies and the kids, and constantly having to learn to be more patient. Right? So that's exactly right. And I think most parents go through this same idea, right? And some people are naturally more, like my wife's much more patient naturally. So it depends on your personality. But she has other challenges with the kids. So we all have challenges. So absolutely, being a parent will frustrate you, and the key is to learn from it. And again, if you can see it as a positive thing that's helping you grow and learn. It's not easy. As I said, it's not easy that change in attitude. In the beginning, you're maybe just pretending and you don't really feel it. It takes time to change it. It's very similar to exercise. Very similar to exercise, right? I'll just use running as an example. There are a lot of people. Well, I can remember the first time I went running, like really went running, like several miles, right? Like longer distance running. So, let's say a 5K. This was when I was in high school. So before that, I had never really done any running very long. Maybe, just running around as a kid playing. But I'd never gone like what we might call jogging, right? And I just decided I wanted to try it. And I did it in the middle of the summer and the hottest part of the day, which now I realize was foolish. And I went out and I just put on some shoes and went running, tried to run hard. And it was miserable. It was horrible. And, very, 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 very uncomfortable. I hated it. I was like, this is terrible. Why do people do this? Right? And there's a lot of people have this experience with running or other kinds of exercise, where your first experiences can be very negative, painful, your muscles hurt, you're having a hard time breathing, everything's super uncomfortable. So but with time, you can change that attitude, right? And you actually will learn to enjoy the tiredness. You will learn to enjoy those uncomfortable feelings, and to need it, like Rickson's talking about. I'm this way for sure now, and for a long time, as I need exercise. If I don't get exercise, I feel depressed and frustrated. It's the opposite. I need to do it. I need to feel that tiredness in my body. I need to feel the challenge. I like that feeling of like I'm fighting and I'm breathing. I'm sweating like crazy. I now feel that and see that as a very positive experience, right? So we can do it. We can change how we see these things. Something that seems unpleasant, something that seems negative now, with our minds and with time, we can change it and to see it as something positive, to actually enjoy it, even if it's difficult. It definitely is possible. Yeah, Anna gives more examples. When you take care of your children, sometimes it's extremely difficult. I remember your podcast about lack of sleep and energy. You already overcome it. Well, not 100%, but better now. I'm trying to handle it now. Yes, every parent knows this, right? Lack of sleep. I remember when I was, young in my 20s that if I had to get up before, if I had to get up before like 10 or 9:30, let's say, in the morning, I would be so tired and I thought it was so terrible, because in college I would always want my classes to be 10 o'clock or later. And then children change that. Now I can get up anytime. Yeah, this is interesting. Muhammad Ali says, there was an old TED Talk where Kelly McGonigal said, our perception of stress defines its effect on us. Great. This is a good answer to that previous comment. Those who believe stress is fine are actually preparing us for challenge, live longer. Exactly. This is kind of what Rickson's getting at. This is what Dr. Huberman's. It's not the stress that breaks down your body. It's not the stress to a level, obviously. we all have limits, right? But in general, stress, frustration is not necessarily negative. It won't necessarily hurt you. It actually can help you. And a lot of it depends, what Muhammad Ali is saying, on how do you see it? What's the meaning you give it? How do you experience it? Do you experience the stress as something positive that's helping you get stronger, or something negative that, oh, I hate this, oh, this is terrible, right? It's very different, even if it's the same exact physical experience, right? That's exactly what happens with exercise. One person is lifting heavy weights and their muscles are in pain and burning, and one person says, this is great, my muscles are getting stronger. And another person says, this is terrible, and thinks, this is terrible, the pain is horrible, I hate this. It's very different. Very, very, very different. It's the same stress, though. Right? And this is also true psychologically and for learning anything. Yeah, Jung says business English is a great example. Very much. And, there's lots of topics in English, in any language, where that has very specific vocabulary, and your general English, your conversational English might be very, very, very good, but you try to talk about that topic and suddenly you feel like your English is terrible, right? And that's why. That's totally normal. Yeah, Rogelio, is it Rogelio or Rogelio? Quirius says, totally agree. Frustration pushes us to improve any skill we want to. Indeed. Mina says, good morning from India. And Jung follows up. Frustrations, for example, when we have a bad exam result, we will grow up. Yeah, right. You could see that. If you have an exam, a test, a challenge, a fight, anything, and you lose, a competition, and you lose, you could see that as depressing and stressful and terrible and go down, down, down. Or you could see this as frustration. Okay, I lost. I made mistakes. The other team was better. The other person was better. How do I get better? And you can use it to solve this problem and to improve. Which is what Rickson was saying too. That even though Rickson in his professional fights didn't lose, he's saying when he trained, he would lose. And in the early part of the book, he had a brother named Hoge who just beat him all the time, right? Constantly beat him in practice. Hoge was like the number one guy in the family before Rickson. And so he talked about how, though, that made him get better because he was always frustrated because he was always losing to him, to his brother, to his big brother. And of course, it helped him to improve because when he lost, he would have to figure out, why did I lose? What did I do wrong? What did he do better? How can I improve? Right? And it gets his brain, especially his unconscious brain, working on those problems. And it took years for him to finally beat his brother in practice. But so it's not always immediately, but we're always improving. The thing is, in competition, we have to be careful with competition because the other guy is also getting better, or the other people. So we might sometimes when we're competing, like jiu-jitsu is another good example. We keep losing. I keep losing to this guy. Well, yeah, he's also getting better. But if you compare yourself to yourself a year ago, and you realize, oh, I'm much better than I used to be, or compare yourself to one of the newer guys coming in, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm much better than them now, and I used to be like them, right? That's a better comparison. Muhammad Ali quotes David Goggins. He says, when we don't quit in that moment, our mind opens up and tries to find something because it knows this guy is not going to give up. He's not going to run away. Yeah, this is kind of psychologically what's happening. When you're so frustrated, when you're experiencing pain and difficulty, and if you keep pushing into it, It's like your unconscious brain, some part of you deep inside, maybe it's your soul, will just say, oh, he's not going to quit. Not quitting. Right? So I've got to find a solution. Got to find a solution because he won't quit. He won't stop. So then your brain, your creativity, your unconscious, your subconscious starts really working on that problem very, very, very intensely to find a way to improve it, to find a way to solve the problem. When you quit, when you stop the pain, when you stop the frustration, there's less unconscious, there's less psychological pressure to improve. We can still improve, but it'll be more slowly. And to be able to do this long term, you've got to learn somehow to see that frustration as positive and to actually enjoy it. It takes some time, but you can train yourself to do that more and more. I'm trying to do this in jiu-jitsu myself now, where, hey, this is fun. I'm getting choked. And again, and actually laughter helps. I think humor is, for me, that's what helps. Like, it's a little hard sometimes to just say, yeah, this is good, I'm learning. Well, it doesn't feel that way because I'm still failing a lot. But what it does help is just to laugh about it, like, oh my God, I just lost again. I tapped again. You got me again. Oh my God. And I just laugh, and it just makes the whole feeling lighter, and then I can keep going, not get so serious about it. So I think that's the other thing, is that seeing it as a game, that when we're losing and getting frustrated, to like try to laugh a little about it, like, and seeing it more like a game, like a playful game, and not like such a serious thing, because then we can keep going. And you say, oh yeah, I am frustrated. Oh, you got me again. All right, let's do it again. Cool. Investing Time says, I have completed 173 days of the listening challenge. A few more days I'll do them. But I have learned a lot of things from your podcasts. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Muhammad Ali again has got some very interesting comments. I've heard that mental frustration requires physical activity as its rest. And physical frustration needs sleep. Yeah. This is, it's a nice idea, right? So mental frustration, meaning, like, let's say you're studying something, right? And then you keep going, you keep pushing, and then it's time to take a break. So he's saying a good way to take a break from mental work, mental frustration, is to do something physical, like go exercise. I agree with that. I do agree with that, because I found that to be true. Like, if you want, like, if you keep, your brain is too busy focusing on something and you're really frustrated, and now it's time to get a break, go lift weights and you'll forget about it. You have to. If the weights are heavy enough, you have to focus on the weight, or else you're going to drop it on your head. And so it kind of like will push out all that, and it gives you a mental break. So that's true. Many times, some kind, especially intense, meaning powerful physical activity, can give you a mental break. All right. Like fighting is another one in jiu-jitsu. When I'm fighting, I'm only thinking about jiu-jitsu, and I can't think about anything else because it's too intense. So I get a break from everything else mentally. And then for physical stress, like you exercise and you're working out, then yes, you need to sleep is great. You need to sleep and just let your body sleep, or meditate, or even just get a massage, things like that, where you're totally relaxing your body. Wellington says, what do you think about learning English with movies? Check it out. I've got on my channel, I've got, learn English with movies. There's a YouTube video about it where I talk about how to do it. And I do think it's good. It can be good. Depends how you do it. Okay, here's another similar quote. This is from Perzemo. This is from Harv Eker, kind of motivational speaker. He says, the only time you're actually growing is when you are uncomfortable. Right. And then today's topic, we're saying it's actually even more than uncomfortable, frustrated, which I'd say is a stronger word. Comfortable is, it's a good word. Be uncomfortable. Don't be too comfortable. But a stronger feeling is frustration. This is a lot of discomfort. Frustration, is a strong emotion that we usually want to avoid, but it's actually, we want to go into it and learn to enjoy it. Just like you can learn to enjoy muscle pain when you're exercising. You can learn to enjoy feeling very tired from exercise. You can learn to enjoy mental difficulties and challenges. So you can also learn to enjoy emotional challenges like frustration. We can learn that. Mikhail Kalishnikov, thank you very much, says, I totally agree. Many things that you're teaching. It's a great mindset to have, very refreshing point of view. Makes it easier to learn languages. Thank you. S-A-W says, frustration makes us humble and closer to natural laws. It does humble us. And this is sort of what, this is also what Rickson was saying, is that it kept him humble, right? And this guy was a really tough fighter, beating everybody. But that's a danger. Success can bring failure in that way, big failure. And success can bring dangers when we start to believe that we're so great, nobody can beat me, I'm awesome, and that's when you can then you become lazy, stop growing, right? This is what Rickson was saying. Luis Arturs, what's the best way to get what you want with less frustration? Well, you just got to go slowly. If you have a, frustration again is it's something you build up little by little. So you don't need to start being super, super, super frustrated all the time. You can just push a little bit, like just do an extra couple minutes of practice. When you're frustrated, you feel frustrated, don't stop immediately. Keep going for a couple more minutes and try to smile while you do it. And then the next time, try to go for 4 minutes. And the next time, try to go for maybe 5 minutes, right? So you build it up. It's just like running. You don't run a marathon the first time, okay? Unless you're crazy. You go run, a couple kilometers slowly, and you build up. If you want to really run a full marathon, you build it up slowly. And I think it's the same thing with these emotional challenges. Yeah, this is a very good point. Ranieri DeMarco says, don't solve all problems for children. They have to deal with problems to learn faster. Excellent way to connect this to children and parenting. That's right. Children need frustration. Very good point. So if you do everything for them, if you help them too much and too soon, because they're getting frustrated, and they get frustrated, then they won't learn as much. They won't learn as fast. Like if you watch babies trying to stand up in the beginning and walk, Well, what happens? They fall all the time. They're and they get mad. Like my kids, especially my daughter, will get so mad and kind of funny. But you don't go over there and do it for them. You can't. Don't do that. You don't go do it and stand up for them, because then they don't get strong. They need to fall. They need to learn the balance. So of course, put them on a soft floor where it's safe for them to fall. But then you let them fall, right? Like I do this with my kids. Sometimes it's like they're climbing and they do crazy stuff, and of course I'm worried they're gonna fall. So sometimes I'll just stand next to them and under them, but I don't hold them. So if they fall, I can catch them, but I'm gonna let them fall, right? And if it's safe, if they're just gonna get some bumps, some bruises, some scrapes, they need that. It's important, right? When I was a kid, I remember my knees were always scraped. My knees were always bloody from falling and crashing my bicycle and all kinds of stuff. This is normal. So exactly right. It's very, 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 very good to let your kids get frustrated. It's also mentally. They're trying to study something. Don't immediately give them the answer. Let them be frustrated for a while. Let them try to figure stuff out. Like, Dad, how do I do this? What do you think? Instead of telling them the answer, you just ask a question. Well, what do you think? How could you figure that out? What could you try next? Right? Encourage them to just try other stuff and keep going when they're frustrated, instead of just immediately doing it for them. Don't do stuff for your kids so much. Really, really, that's an excellent point. That's a great comment. Top G Tate says, "Hey Jay, I want to thank you so much. I remember back in 2014. Wow. When I started to learn English from the beginning, I listened to your mini stories, which helped me a lot. Now I'm in the USA." Wow, fantastic. Very nice. So what's that, 8 years ago? Impressive. Okay, I'll take a couple more and then done. Yep, we've gone about an hour, so I think it's a good time to... see if I missed any. Yoki says, "It's good to know that people who have the same purpose are getting together here from different parts of the world." That's nice, isn't it? I agree. It's very nice. Rizgari Bikari says, "To be comfortable, we need to reboot ourselves by forgiving people. Sometimes we have to forget something that hurt ourselves or our mind." Yeah, this is kind of slightly different topic rather than, but yes, it's good advice. Forgiveness is, a good thing to do, usually. Yeah, Muhammad Ali gives another point, is that also they also say, people say, let kids get bored. Exactly right. So they don't just give them toys or electronics and stuff all the time. Yes, I agree with that also, that this is another part of childhood of in terms of kids getting frustrated. Sometimes they will get bored. Dad, I'm bored. Right? Don't immediately like give them a video game or something. Let them figure it out. That this is where creativity comes from, right? Again, frustration. Frustration creates a very strong motivation to find a solution. So if the kids are bored, it's all right for them to be bored. And if they're bored every day, all the time, that's a bad sign. But just sometimes they're bored, then that's great. You can just help them by, again, asking questions. Well, what do you want to do? What could you do? Right? What are some ideas? Just ask them questions and let them come up with answers. I mean, I do this. I get bored too. I get bored all the time. I have a low boredom tolerance, and I get constantly bored. And so I'm always, but it creates this thing like with my kids, I was getting bored. We were just doing the same thing all the time, every day. And last week we did a lot of new stuff because I was getting so bored, and I was like, I'm sick of just going and doing the same stuff all the time. Let's do something new. So I got online and I found some new stuff to do here, and we went to see some reptiles, and we went to the aquarium, and we went to a water park, and anyway, I found a bunch of new stuff to try with them, and it was really fun. It was good new experiences for them too. So, and sometimes I'll ask the kids, what do you guys want to do? Yep, English for you. Good job. Keep going. Very nice. Adam Kamalov, good to see you again. Says, I finished your Power English course. Now everybody is shocked by my results because I can speak English without thinking about grammar rules. Thank you. Hey, awesome. And thanks for, you're on our comments here. Often I recognize your name. So congratulations. That's great. All right, I think that's it. So to review, so I think someone asked about what the name of the book was again, the Rickson Gracie book. I'll write it in the comments. It's called Breathe. Breathe, like, breathe. Because he talks a lot about the importance of breathing correctly. And it's by Rickson Gracie. And the thing is, though, it's actually spelled with an R, which Brazilians will understand. But if you don't understand, that R is pronounced like an H in English. Rickson Gracie is the writer of the book, which is it's generally a good book. Breathe by Rickson Gracie. If you're interested in fighting, it's really good. But even if you're not, it's quite interesting to just see how to. It's always interesting to read books. I've read several books by different fighters and other people, but just to see, like top athletes or just top anybody, it's interesting to see how they think. Right? And they all have their challenges. It's good because you see that these people also had challenges. And you can see, how do they think? How did they overcome challenges? How did they learn? How did they get better? So we can often learn a lot from them, right? And Rickson's got a lot of good stuff in his, and some philosophical stuff too, not just the fighting. Rahaf says, what about being frustrated for a long time? And that'll be our last question. It's a good point. So if you're frustrated about the exact same thing for a long time, that probably is a sign that you're doing something wrong. You need to make some sort of change, right? Because we need this frustration, but eventually, yes, we should solve the problem. Then we need new frustration. So I'll use my jiu-jitsu example again, because I like sports examples because they're just very simple. You can understand them easily. So let's say that guillotine choke again. If I keep practicing the guillotine choke escape for 3 months and I never get better and I never get out, it never succeeds, well, then I would be very, very frustrated, right? Because then it'd be like, well, something's wrong. I'm doing something very wrong because I'm still not getting better at all. And for something that simple, I should improve within 3 months. I've already improved. Like I said, it took me about maybe a week and a half, and now I'm seeing improvement. But I had to feel frustration for, about 10 days of a lot of frustration. And then now some improvement, but still not great, but some improvement. So what do I need to do? Maybe I need to make the challenge a little harder. I need to make some more frustration again, but it's a new frustration, right? It's a new level. That's the key, right? Just like lifting weights, you need that weight to feel heavy. So after a while, you're lifting the weights, that same weight starts to feel easy, right? You're stronger now. So what do you have to do? You've got to put on more weight. It's not the same weight. So like what Rahaf is asking is, well, what if you're lifting weights and you're lifting the same weight for 1 year and it still feels super heavy? It still feels the same. You're not getting any stronger. That's a problem. That's a sign of a deeper problem where, yeah, you might be burned out. That's one possibility. Maybe you do need to just take a total break for like a longer break and not think about it and not focus on it and not do it and just rest, right? It's like if you're lifting the same weight for a year and it still feels the same and you're not getting any better, you can't do any more, maybe you burned out those muscles. You might be what's called overtraining. You might have trained too much. You're doing too much. Maybe you need to take a couple months of going very easy. No frustration at all. Very, very light and lots of extra sleep and extra nutrition, and take a very big rest and recover, right? And this can also be mentally. So if it's too much, if you don't get any improvement after, a good amount of time, that is a sign you're something's wrong. Maybe you're just trying the wrong method, right? Like if I try that escape and it's failing, maybe I need to try a different escape. That technique I'm trying maybe doesn't work for my body or for me for some reason, and I need to try something totally different. Or maybe I would take a break from doing that choke escape and I would just focus on something totally different. Or maybe I would need a rest. Maybe my body's tired and I need a rest from jiu-jitsu for a while. Right? So that's the difference, right? We need the frustration to keep learning, but it should be new frustrations. If it's just the exact same one that goes too long, then it means we're not learning, obviously. We're not improving. And so that's where we probably need to take a break and try something very different. All right, guys. As always, go to effortlessenglishclub.com. You've heard some people talking about Power English and VIP, and they've had some great success. And you will too when you join my VIP program or my Power English course at effortlessenglishclub.com. Lots of love to you. Enjoy. Try to do it. Fake it in the beginning. Try to enjoy that frustration.